Tonight for red beans and rice, we're going to be doing it in this Dutch oven, which is a Dutch oven. Welcome back to the kitchen. Tonight we're going to continue our one-ish pot meal mini-series that we have running, where you build your meal mostly in one pot. It's going to be in the French oven, which is really a Dutch oven, just French. But tonight it's going to be red beans and rice, one of my absolutely favorite meals. I was first introduced to this years ago in a heavily modified version where you cooked kielbasa and red beans and some mixture of Heinz 57, Worcestershire, and one other thing. I can't remember exactly what it was. And I loved it then. I appreciate it for what it is now, but this is going to be still kind of heavily modified, but a little bit more closer to what people would find in a restaurant. A quick note about the modifications. With this being in the public domain, someone will come across it and say, you're not doing it right because you're using a pre-made seasoning. When it comes down to you cooking dinner and what you have to do and putting out something tasty, you do what you have to do. And to be honest with you, a lot of the restaurants that you go to, unless they're very high-end, they're going to be finding some cheats and shortcuts along the way as well. So let's get over to the stove and get this going. Welcome over to the stove. So I've had my French/Dutch oven preheating on medium-low heat for a couple minutes. It's a little warm to the touch, which is exactly where we want it. So what we're going to do is I have 4 pieces of thicker cut bacon. I'll show you here. It's, a pretty good slice. This is from Burgers, so it's a local to Missouri bacon. Very well smoked, good flavor. We're going to toss that in. The main part that I want you to take away from this is the bacon, or if you use bacon to start, just make sure you get a thicker cut, because you want something that you can sweat and render some of this fat out so that you have something to then sweat your other vegetables in and really start building flavors. If you have something that's a little on the thinner side, it'll fry up too quickly and get crispy. We really don't want that. We just want this to start to release its fats. And then at the end, we'll add this back in just to add some more flavor. And also the whole idea behind this is that we just want to get some of that smoky flavor really infused all the way in throughout this dish. And in my opinion, a good way to do that is starting with bacon fat. If you don't want to do that, vegetable oil, perfectly fine. But the more smoked meats that you can put in here, the better. I'm just going to show you very basic kind of setup for it. But to get a bit Bob Rossish for a second, the wonderful thing about cooking is that you know what you like, you know who you're cooking for, what they like, and so you can start to build your repertoire around that. So take what I show you as a base, a good guideline, something to point you in the right direction. This doesn't have to be the end all be all. Just it's a good starting point. So as we continue to kind of fry this bacon, it's starting to render its fat, which is wonderful. and it smells absolutely delicious. This is something that I love to start, and then once you get everything going, you get it cooking, you step outside and you come back in and the entire house just smells of the dish. And so it's wonderful. So I'm going to let this go probably another 2 to 3 minutes, try to really render as much as fat out as I can before it really starts to get crisp. Another good shortcut that you can do, it sounds kind of counterintuitive, is that if you want to render a lot of fat out, but you want to keep the bacon kind of soft like it is now, throw some water in there, and that water will start to leach out the bacon fat. But I'm going to give this another couple minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll continue to build our dish. So it's been about 3 minutes. You can see the color of the bacon is really starting to deepen, and I have more of that bacon fat on the bottom, which is exactly what we want. So a couple more seconds. I want to kind of push it a little bit. Now, depending on the pot you're using, you may or may not feel this. I can feel it on mine. It's got some resistance on the bottom. It's like it's building a bit of a fond, which tells me that I'm getting close to where I want. And I can see on this piece specifically, this piece right there, you can see where it's kind of starting to crisp. So before it gets too much farther, I'm going to get my fish spatula. Just going to kind of get those out of there. You can say I'm fishing them out with my fish spatula. I know I've got great jokes. So some of them are being a little finicky. So I'll go ahead and get those. And that last one, yeah, I'll leave it. So now what I'm going to do, I have one green bell pepper and a couple ribs of celery. I'll throw that in. Turn the heat down just a little bit. Start sweating those in that bacon fat. Just want them to soften a little bit, kind of impart some flavor. I'm going to light sprinkling of salt, maybe a teaspoon at most, to aid in the sweating process. Like I said, you don't want to get a whole lot of color on it, just sweat them nicely. While those are sweating, I'm going to throw about 6 bay leaves in there. Now, that probably sounds like a lot, and that's because it is. These are the dry store-bought bay leaves, and because they just have sat around for so long, their potency may not be as good as if you had bought them fresh. So my rule of thumb is if a recipe calls for a certain number of bay leaves, say 2, and I have dry bay leaves on hand, I'm going to double that just because that will help get that flavor that I want out of them. And those peppers and celery are starting to get there, not much longer. So while those finish up, I'm going to go in with 3 cloves of garlic, and I'm going in kind of late with those because I don't want that. I want that garlic to infuse the flavor. I don't want it to fry. I don't want to get it to get too brown because it will start to get bitter. And we don't want that. We want that nice garlic flavor. And so going in towards the end of the sweating process, now we have bacon fat, but we also have the liquids from the peppers and the celery to help kind of keep that garlic from burning. And they're getting there. You'll notice that my peppers and celery aren't the greatest cuts. It's perfectly fine. We're going to simmer this for 45 minutes to an hour to reduce the flavors, and then we'll fish out the bay leaves, and then we're going to blend this all. So because of that, it doesn't have to be the most perfect cuts, which is nice. Gives you a bit of leeway. And so I'm happy with where those peppers and onions are. So right before we finish this up and get to what I call Ronto peeling it, I'm going to add in a tablespoon of oregano. Again, letting that fry in the oil and along with whatever liquids the aromatics I've released. It's going to help just infuse the flavor all the way through the dish, which again is what we want. And so now I'm going to go in with 3 cans of drained and rinsed beans. If you have the time and you want to, go right ahead and use dried beans. Soak them. They'll be cooking in here long enough that if you use dried beans and you rehydrated them, that they'll cook until they're all the way soft. If you come to this last minute and you're just trying to throw it together, perfectly fine to use canned beans. So we'll throw that in, and then we're going to go in with probably 6 or 7 cups of chicken stock. And some of that is from a box, and some of that is from some leftover chicken stock I had, which will obviously be a video down the line. But now we're done. We're going to bring this up to a simmer. We're going to let it simmer probably 45 minutes to an hour. I want to reduce some of this liquid and concentrate those flavors. It'll help cook those beans, get them nice and soft, but it'll also help draw out the flavor from the bay leaves and then also from the celery and the green pepper. But for now, you're done. 45 minutes to an hour later, we'll come back and we'll check it. So after an hour, it has reduced nicely, as you can see, and it smells wonderful. So I've already gone ahead and taken out the bay leaves. Now all I'm going to do is turn the heat down to the lowest setting. I'm going to take my stick blender and I'm just going to head and pulse it a couple of times and start blending this together. And you can blend it as much or as little as you like. If you like some chunks, leave some chunks. I like mine pretty well blended. If you don't have an immersion blender, like some pastry knives or potato masher would work just fine. But as you can see, as you blend it, it will start to thicken up on its own. You can see the consistency has already changed, and that's because of the beans. So now I'm going to take my Cajun seasoning. Again, store-bought, I'm perfectly fine with that. The Cajun seasoning that I use has some salt in it, so I add it a little bit at a time. And I'll taste for seasoning. It's still a little thin, but it will thicken up as it continues to warm the meat that we're about to put in. I'll probably put in another tablespoon, no, teaspoon and a half, 2 teaspoons. And so now, right before I started back over here, I put the rice on. So as the rice starts to warm up, as the rice cooks, I'm going to put the andouille sausage in to warm up, and then I'm going to go back in with the bacon that we started with, and as that rice cooks, then we're going to heat up the sausage and the bacon, and then we're going to be ready to go.